Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Platts, and I am the Deputy Chief Scientist for the Human Research Program. We'll begin with a short overview of HRP, and then we'll discuss the solicitation before we open it up for questions from the audience. That's the next slide. Thank you. So this pre-proposers conference is intended to clarify the solicitation and answer any questions from our folks online. These will all be posted after the fact, so everyone has equal access to all of the questions and answers. It is open to all. There's no limitation. The presentation and the Q&A, as I said, will be posted, and the website is there in blue under the second bullet. One thing that might happen is if you ask a question that requires some discussion, we will mute the line and we will discuss it here, and then we'll come back and give you the best answer possible. There is a possibility that we will need to do some more research before we answer a question. In that circumstance, we will post the question and the answer on the NSPIRE's website. Next slide, please. So the Human Research Program, and this is very important, is an applied research program. We are not NIH in space. We have a very specific mission and very specific goals. So we perform the research necessary to understand and reduce the risk to the human of exploration spaceflight. We enable development of human spaceflight medical and human performance standards. Those are things like CO2 levels, radiation limits, things like that. So we inform medical operations and other programs on how to set those standards and those limits. And then finally, we develop and validate technology that will help characterize or reduce medical risk. These are things like measuring devices, ultrasound machines, how do you do CPR in space, all those types of things that we call that sort of the pointy end of the stick, and that's where HRP translates to medical operations. Next slide, please. So many of you have probably seen this. It's sort of the overview of the foreseeable plans for NASA, where we will return to the lunar surface. The first woman and the next man will land on the moon, and then that's 2024 currently scheduled. That's in multiple phases, and then in the longer term, in the 2030s, we will go to Mars. Next slide, please. So HRP is divided up into 5 elements. Elements is sort of like a department at a medical school. So our elements are exploration medical capabilities. These are the folks transitioning and doing the work for future medical operations, human factors and behavioral performance. This is the interface between the humans, the vehicles, habitat, things like that, and also human behavior, both individual and interpersonal. Human health countermeasures is essentially our physiology department. That's where cardiovascular risks are, bone risks, exercise risks, all those types of things, nutrition, they're all housed within HHC. Research operation and integration is a little bit different. They don't solicit their own research. What they do is make everyone else's research run. And so there are our implementation arm. They work with folks both to get studies done on station as well as in analogs like Hera or Antarctica, things like that, bedrest also. And then finally, space radiation is just what it sounds, studying the biological effects of radiation exposure on the human. We also fund Translational Research Institute through a cooperative agreement, and we collaborate quite a bit with NASA's space biology program. Space biology are the folks who may have heard about this study, growing lettuce and other crop foods aboard the station, and that's a collaboration with us. Next slide, please. And so on the top left, obviously, that's the International Space Station. We fund a lot of research that's done aboard the space station. Obviously, you can imagine how difficult it is to do research there. It's costly, it's expensive for up mass and down mass. There isn't a lot of room, there isn't a lot of power, there isn't a lot of time, there aren't a lot of astronauts. So it's very difficult and very expensive to do research there. Because of that, we also have ground-based analogs that we do research with. So top right is NASA's Space Radiation Laboratory on Long Island, and that's where we can generate the galactic cosmic rays, or at least simulate them, and do radiation experiments with animal models. On the bottom left is the NBHAB facility in Cologne, Germany, and that's a bed rest facility. The nice thing about that facility is you can modify the atmosphere and the pressure so that we can do lots of different tests that we can't do in any other facility. On the bottom right is one of our isolation analogs, and that one is the Human Exploration Research Analog, lovingly referred to as HERA, and there we do 45-day studies, isolation. A lot of HFBP work is done there. Next slide, please. And so in our list of how we do risk mitigation, really the two that are most concerning for this group is the third, identify the research product required to fill the gap. Now, we've identified the products that we need, and we're looking for everyone listening to write proposals to help fill those gaps. And then, or generate the research products, and that's directly what we're asking you folks to do, is generate the research products, whether that's knowledge or recommendations to standards or polls of health. Next slide, please. So just to completely confuse you, here is our path to risk reduction, and it's sort of a stoplight chart. Red is obviously the worst, yellow is in between, and then green is pretty much good to go. Blue is an optimization potential. So you may have a countermeasure in place, but it could be possible to create a countermeasure that's less costly or less heavy or easier to implement. So that's what the blue would be. So the red ones are the ones we really want to solve before the end of station, before we go to Mars. And you can see some of those: space radiation, cognitive and behavioral conditions, inadequate food and nutrition are just a few of our red risks. Next slide, please. So as I sort of alluded to, we have significant constraints on schedule, crew access, and the need for risk mitigation that sets us apart from NIH and NSF. So both the station and the analogs are limited resources. You're never going to get to do 100 subjects, or even 50 subjects, or probably even 25 subjects. Most of the studies that we see in flight have 12 or fewer subjects, although that's not a hard limitation. That just tends to be the number that falls out. The number and demographics of astronauts vary. If you're trying to do a sex differences study and you require 8 female astronauts, that could take you a very, very long time to do. The agency exploration architecture influences the priorities, which can change how the research is being done. Our focus is on human risk mitigation. And so, you know, the way that we look at studies is different from NIH. We have to balance mature and applied research back versus mechanistic and fundamental research. Yes, everyone wants to be novel and innovative. However, if your experiment is using well-established methods, but will answer a question that is important to us, that is just as valuable as the newest, most innovative technique that's around the block. Next slide, please. For us, statistics are extremely important. It's very important that you have a robust statistical design, that you have a strong power analysis, and it's recommended, although not required, that you have a statistician as part of your study team. With small N studies, you will not always achieve the ideal sample size, so we need to know how you're going to deal with that. Step 2 proposals must include a dedicated section describing your statistical approach or your justification for not needing one. If you don't have a statistical approach and you haven't told us why, it is highly unlikely that you'll be funded. We also need to know your proposed sampling procedures, experimental design, data analysis methodology. Those will all be evaluated by a statistician. Next slide, please. So here's our overall solicitation process. So this is a two-step solicitation. Step 1 proposals are submitted to NASA and should include a synopsis of the intended research. The page limit for a Step 1 proposal is 1 page. So please pay attention to that 1 page. It's relatively new. We used to do longer Step 1s. So if you have experience writing for us in the past, please 1 page for the Step 1. Step 1 proposals are due by January 3rd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. 5:01? Nope. So let's be prompt. Step 1 proposals must follow the specifications listed in the solicitation. Only applicants who submit a relevant Step 1 proposal will be invited to submit a Step 2 proposal. The Step 2 proposal window opens January 10th for Appendix C and February 4th for Appendix C. Invited Step 2 proposals are due by April 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern. The page limit for the central scientific/technical description are 10 pages for Appendix C and 5 pages for Appendix D. Again, this is a relatively new implementation, so please pay attention to the page limit. If you send us a 20-page grant proposal, you can guess what might happen to that. Step 2 proposals will be reviewed for both merit and programmatic relevance. So the merit peer review will be conducted by a panel of scientific and technical subject matter experts. Once that's completed, NASA will evaluate the programmatic balance, feasibility, and cost of the proposal. Final award decisions will be announced by September 2020. So the topics for Appendix T, we have 8 of them. So this is nice to see a large number. I'm sure you folks will appreciate it. It's nice for us to get out a nice group of topics as well. The first topic, countermeasures for mitigation of sensory motor effects following unloading by simulated weightlessness, head down bed rest. Number 2, mitigation of motion sickness during and immediately following G transitions when returning from space to Earth. Number 3, long-term ocular and brain structural functional consequences of spaceflight. Number 4, exploration missions onboard psychological intervention, identification, verification, and validation. Number 5, maintaining team performance and functioning, team dynamics, and interpersonal relationships. Number 6, space radiation exposure and tissue homeostasis. Number 7 is a mouthful, so let's give this a go. Interaction of clonal, see I knew I'd mess it up, clonal hematopoiesis of indeterminate potential and space radiation exposure on the risks of leukemia and cardiovascular disease. Wow, we're cramming a lot into number 7, but it's very exciting. And finally, number 8, hematopoietic and immune system functional endpoints. Next slide, please. Appendix D is our omnibus appendix. Remember that our omnibus selections are designed to be completed in 1 year with a maximum cost of $150,000. So the short-term investigations or technology development projects that provide innovative approaches to any of the risks and associated knowledge gaps contained in the integrated research plan. The integrated research plan was that stoplight chart that I showed earlier. And so for this particular call, for the omnibus, well, I guess for all omnibus calls, you don't have to stick specifically to the 8 topics that we're proposing here. You can address any risk on that chart. Number 2 for Appendix D is the basic investigations opportunity for investigators new to NASA. This is similar to an omnibus, but it has a requirement that the PI not have had NASA funding for the previous 10 years. And so if you fit into that category, that allows the possibility for renewal of the grant proposal for a second year. Next slide, please. And that completes our overview and our description of this particular call. So now I guess we will open up the question line. So the first question that we'll answer is from Nicola. To the selected projects, will NASA provide funds so that the study will be performed in the facility of the applicant? Does NASA plan to execute it in its own facilities or both? I think that answer is both, depending on which one you're responding to. But the solicitation, the grants that are awarded are to the institution. And so if it's a ground-based study that you can do in your own laboratory, then that's fine. But if it's something that needs the radiation facility or a bed rest facility or an isolation facility, those will be done at the NASA facility. Yes, Dr. Peter Norse is going to add something.
Yeah, so if you take the 3 of the solicitations that came from our elements, the space motion sickness one and the sensor motor one, as well as the long-term stand monitoring solicitation we've done, then the SMS will be in your own laboratory. The sensor motor will supply the bed rest facility for 60 days. And the final one will be data that has been obtained or will be obtained from astronauts in space. So you have kind of 3 different venues in this particular regard.
And clearly for spaceflight studies, we will limit you to the space station. You don't get to fly your own vehicle.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, our next question from Christopher. Is there any room or is it encouraged for interdisciplinary proposals that cross the 5 HRP elements? Using that example, a grant that examines, I think it should be, space radiation effects on cognitive behavior. Oops, we go back. And animal models while also using interviews that Leah and so I don't think any of the proposals right now are calling for that, but yeah, I guess the omnibus, it might be hard to fit that into the time and budget constraints, but that could fit into an omnibus. We always do encourage interdisciplinary proposals. And many of the topics that we have here could be interdisciplinary proposals, but the example given here is, I don't know if that would fit into any of the proposed topics. Peter?
I totally agree with you, but I would say that it could not be excluded that in the SANS long-term health effects one, in order to make it clear to people, we have indicated it's a SANS problem, so that's what we're focusing on. But there could be overlaps into cognition and brain, as well as some cardiovascular. That's why we have indicated those as secondary aims. It's not the primary. It's very important to indicate it's not the primary. We are not looking for specific proposal with a primary aim to look into cardiovascular cognition, but it could be included in what is done in the for SANS health purposes.
Gotcha. Thunder, do you want to add anything, or are you good? Okay. So all of our elements agree with Peter's comment. Next question from James for topic 4, page D14. Is there a reference or citation for the term Astro Buddy Care? Thunder?
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We will have to post a response to that. That's a good question. I'm not sure if it's just internal terminology that was used or whether there's a reference. So
okay, great.
We'll get back with that.
So we'll get back to you. Please check the website for the answer to that question. From Zeluntai, I hope didn't murder that too bad. Can we cover more than one subject? Yes, you can submit as many proposals as you would like. I myself have submitted, in the old days when I submitted such things, I've submitted quite a few grant proposals all at one time. From Shyam Das, can I apply for artificial gravity simulation? Peter?
That is not excluded. We are not in particular looking for a countermeasure like, but in order to understand maybe mitigation effects on, let's take the sensor motor, I know that this is maybe far out, but we cannot exclude that you can use artificial gravity to understand a mechanism that then can be mitigated otherwise. I would say it's not excluded, but it's not our prime aim to develop an artificial centrifugation countermeasure for deep space missions or anything in the future.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. From Veerley, what is the max budget per project for Appendix T? Yeah, each one is a little different, so we'd ask you to read through the solicitation for any details about budgetary information. From Anuj, for topic 6, space radiation exposure, would simulation studies be considered responsive, or are you seeking specifically cell tissue animal studies? Stand by, please. So after looking through and making sure, we would not consider the computational modeling as responsive. The goal is to get actual data from living beings. Vivonics, will you be sending out the slides? I believe they will be posted at the NREF website at the conclusion. Ben, do you have any more details on that?
Nope, that's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Shuichi, regarding one-page limitations and 4,000 characters, any different? One page. So worry about the one-page limitation. So from Christopher, what resources are accessible for bioassays and behavioral assessment forums? How can we connect to HERA or Arctic resources to answer these? Stand by, please.
So we do have the standard measures information posted on the NSPIRE's website alongside the solicitation. And then we also have HERA supplementary information posted alongside the solicitation on the NSPIRE's website.
Next one is from Tim Squire. Thanks for the presentation. I work in Australia. From my understanding, NASA does not provide funding to international agencies. That is correct.
Yes, this is Letty Vega. To add, while NASA does not fund international entities, if you are an international, if you are from Australia, for example, and receive funding from an Australian government agency, then you can apply for that grant. You just need to, with your proposal, you need to attach a letter of support from that sponsoring governmental agency that says, if selected, you will be funded by the Australian government. Thank you.
Next one is from Sergey. In your view, what is the best approach to build a proposal for a universal instrument? I don't think this is the correct venue to discuss that question. That's the kind of thing that we would ask investigators to do, and we won't prescribe how to do it. So we'll move on to the next question. Yeah, so if we were to discuss that, the answer would have to be posted with this, and so there would be no intellectual property. It would be public domain, so everybody would get the benefit of that answer. So you probably don't want us discussing that anyway. From Nicola, about interdisciplinary team building, given any specific topic, can NASA provide a list of labs and researchers who are already involved with NASA to any extent and who might be willing, interested to collaborate in the project? Manish.
So you can find a link to the NASA task book in the solicitation, and if not, we can post it in this FAQ document. And that will provide a list of all the currently funded NASA researchers who are doing teamwork.
Next question from Jason. If you're submitting a step 2 for the most recent HERO Omnibus and have not heard if you are selected yet and want to submit to this current one, how similar can these proposals be? Do they need to be quite different? Stand by, please. So this one's a little tricky. You need to submit a new, different proposal. If you submit what we perceive as the same proposal, that would need to include why and how, what things you've changed from the last one. So we would anticipate you would have gotten a response before, because we would ask you, what has changed? What were your responses to the reviewers? So it would be difficult, though not impossible, to submit before you hear. And if you do, I would encourage you to write a different step 2. Next, from Anonymous 6, topic 1. Is NASA only interested in mission-related tasks that entail body coordination and postural stability control, or are tasks with lesser requirements for postural stability of interest as well? Dr. Norris.
It could be, however, be aware that it has to have a countermeasure application purpose, and it has to be very relevant for our in-flight mission test. But we cannot exclude that would be a task that can be tested that is outside what we have been thinking about, if it has the relevance for our countermeasure purposes. I wouldn't exclude it, but it's not the primary aim.
Thank you, Peter. The next question from Marufa. Any nanotechnology project would be good for this solicitation. For example, extraction of hydroxyapatite, nanomaterials to cure bone diseases. I don't see an application in any of these solicitations, although you may be able to figure one out for the omnibus selection, but that would be difficult. Anonymous 6, oh wait, yeah. Topic 1, will investigations other than what we propose be implemented in the same subject? Or will the 60-day period of each arm be exclusively for conducting this sensory motor study? It will be set in a campaign, the way we typically do studies, so there will be many studies done on a single subject, including standard measures and studies from some international partners. So it will not be just one study being done on your subject.
And then from the interference part, our research operations and integration element works to develop campaigns to minimize any conflicts with your data, with any investigator's data. So developing a protocol with all of those investigations so they do not interfere with one another.
And if they do, to a small degree, that's the kind of thing that they work out with each investigator, make sure that they're still getting the data that they require. Would it be possible to circulate the slides? Yes, they will be posted at the conclusion of this question and answer session. Baltu Tech, for proposals that require humans to test a piece of software, do we need an IRB certification of approval? If so, does NASA have a way of helping with this if the applicant's firm is not affiliated with the university? That question is not really pertinent. We can't rule on what the IRB will or will not do. But anything done on an astronaut or human subject does require IRB approval. Anonymous 6, topic 1, how is the bed rest use of the balance plate going to be implemented? What is going to be done with the subjects? Dr. Norse?
Yeah, we have an internal team that has developed a balance plate concept as well as exercise for mitigation of sensory motor disturbance of spaceflight. It's still being worked out in a very detail, but what is indicated in solicitation is what we have for now, because there's a more detailed proposal that's being revised a bit, and therefore at this moment, just take the words as in the solicitation and act accordingly. Don't get into these issues that we're already looking into. We're looking into other types of countermeasures that can be tested on top of what we are testing in this particular concept.
Thank you, Dr. Norsk. Next one from Scott for topic 3. Are any modeling predictive capability of interest, or will just monitoring be considered? Topic 3 is SANS. Peter?
Yes, so that could be of interest, but we are in particular interested in collecting data to monitor health, but you can use the data to get into a model, to any kind of modeling or algorithm or whatever you wish to predict.
Thank you, Peter. From Marufa, may we apply our innovative nanotechnology project based on, 1 minute, please. On animal study to cure human bone diseases or healing a fractured bone. Stand by, please. Bone would not be appropriate for any of the Appendix T topics. if you wanted to propose something like that for an Appendix D topic, that would be possible. All right, next question from Shuichi in slide HRP integrated path. What insufficient data in gray color means? So gray means there isn't enough information to determine whether or not it's actually a risk. From Verley on topic 3, long-term consequences of spaceflight, is the $1.25 million for 5 years the total funding available, or is that per project? That is per project. Next question from Christopher. Within the team's topic, are proposals that address challenges associated with traveling to the moon weighted more heavily than proposals that address challenges associated with travel to Mars? Dr. Whitmire.
Right, so I think the focus within HRP is more on long duration missions, so making Mars a more appropriate target analog there.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next question from Zelantai. I know I'm butchering that, I'm sorry. Can we use the NVHAB in Cologne for subject 1, 2, 3 in Appendix C, testing the vascular aspects of those subjects? Peter?
Yes and no. Please write your proposal independent of the platform that you wish to use, because it's up to the program to do that. Please, you are the specialist in what science you wish to do. Make the best effort to describe the best science. It's being evaluated. It's not an NIH in space. I agree with Dr. Platz about that, but it's done more or less the same way in evaluation of the proposals. And then we will look into how to implement it in the right platform. But don't speculate on those details. This is our specialty. Your specialty is doing defining the scientific requirements. We cannot exclude that this venue will be used, but don't consider that in your proposal. This is not the problem you have. This is our problem.
Thank you, Peter. From Xiaolong, do you encourage people from different institutions to submit a proposal jointly? It's not a requirement, but we always encourage multidisciplinary or multi-institute grant proposals. So yes, we like those, but it's not a requirement of our solicitation. From Larry, is a project dealing with the fundamental molecular biology, biochemical reason for physiological change that occur in microgravity of interest? Stand by, please.
Yeah. We are not looking for very fundamental understanding of some unique mechanisms in context of our platform, that being in space on analog. But if you can associate any of the more fundamental molecular mechanisms into its integrated physiological health aspect, it could be of interest. But it's not the prime aim. And it's important to note that please read the solicitation as it's written and adhere to the main purposes of that, because that is what we're aiming for.
Thank you, Peter. Next from David, do each of topics 1 through 8 has set allocated funding or number of proposals to be funded? We anticipate funding 8 to 10 studies for this entire solicitation. That does not mean we're going to fund one from each topic. It depends on the responses that we get. If we have 3 stellar ones from one topic and none from other topics, you could envision one topic funding multiples. But we do anticipate funding 8 to 10 total projects for all of the topics that we're soliciting. From Nicola. Wow, that's a long one. Let me read it quickly.
Okay, so the question from Nicola is, to what extent can a foreign researcher be involved in the study? Does he have to be a U.S. permanent resident or can be affiliated, for example, with a U.S. university? In the latter case, does he have to be a PI or lab principal, or can he be an associate? If so, for example, a PhD student be a civil figure, or must he necessarily be an employee of the university, and he can submit a proposal or must be a lab principal to do that? Finally, if he can, must he already be enrolled in the university, or would admission offer for the PhD sufficient for step one approval processes, even if he's located abroad? Thanks. So there's several ways. It's a loaded. Thank you for that question. And there's several ways. It's a longer answer. So one, any international scientist can apply to a NASA NRA. So that's one. You can enter. We cannot fund a person at an international entity. They would need to receive funding from their home country's funding agency, whether that's their version of NSF or NSA or their international version of the space agency. That's one way to be funded. You can be an investigator that happens to be a professor at a U.S. university with U.S. funds. At that point, you can just submit a proposal to an NRA, and that is perfectly fine. A student, it's not appropriate for the student, if they are not enrolled in a university, to submit a NASA proposal. Again, the two ways is, if you are at a foreign institution, having the foreign government entity send a letter of support, says that if you are selected, that they will fund you. And then two is if you are at a U.S. university as a faculty member. So, thank you.
Thank you, Letty. From Anonymous 6, topic 3, will or can prospective data collection include collecting data from astronauts pre-flight and or in-flight? Peter.
Yes, thank you.
From Murali, how is the intellectual property protected for the inventor? How is the IP apportioned on further inventions that take place collaboratively? Stand by, please. We're going to defer at this time, and we will post a response online. For this one, we just want to make sure we give the correct answer. Can a private entity apply for a grant? Yes, as long as it's a U.S.-based private entity. From Anuj, would development of a new computational simulation tool that measures radiation exposure to individualized astronaut-specific virtual subjects, both during spaceflight or on Martian surfaces, be appropriate for Appendix D? For Appendix D, yes, that would be appropriate.
And going back to Nicola, you said the audio went down for a while. Did we answer your question with regards to who can apply for a grant if you're an international entity?
We see a few people typing, but we don't have any new questions. Oh, there we go. Is the 8 to 10 anticipated funded projects inclusive of the Omnibus 2 solicitation too? No, it is not. That is for the 8 topics from Appendix T. There will be additional, well, there are likely to be additional grants funded from the Omnibus solicitation. From Xiao Long, for model development and application, can NASA provide related data for test and validation? If yes, how do you get the data? As Peter said before, you propose the science and let us figure out the implementation. As far as getting data, those things are available. If you should be funded, we have folks who would get in touch and can help in that process for requesting data. Do you still seek accurate measurement types for subjects 1, 2, 3, or rather countermeasures? Peter?
This is, we are looking for, the final product, end product will be a countermeasures based on science, but monitoring is part of a countermeasure. So what we envisage in flight for any countermeasure is that we monitor and mitigate. So it's kind of seen in context, but it has to end up with being applicable for our spaceflight purposes, not just understanding a basic mechanism.
Thank you, Peter. We're waiting for more questions. A question from David. Oh, wait. Does topic 7 have a specific thematic tissue organ programmatic preference for NASA, i.e. vascular, cardiac, lung, liver? Stand by, please. Okay, for this topic, from the solicitation, they specifically mentioned cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, lens, and other tissue systems, i.e. immune, endocrine, respiratory, and or digestive. So it sounds like you have quite a few choices on what tissue or organs to write for. It looks like all the ones you've put there, David, would be covered under the solicitation. From Anuj, is it possible to seek collaboration and access to NASA data to validate simulation tools and models? I believe we answered this previously. Yes, that is a possibility once you are funded. From Amy, was this session recorded? Yes, it was. All information about this session should be posted on the EdRest website at the conclusion of the session. From Sergey, would NASA consider proposals jointly funded with other agencies like DARPA? I don't see why not. We like to work with our kin in other government agencies, and we have jointly funded projects before. Those are kind of taken on a case-by-case basis. From Nicola, another very long question. Would NASA be interested in a submission about a study aimed to identify protocols conceived to address the following items? Wow, metabolic, cardiovascular, and cognitive performance. I would suggest you read the topics that we have put forward, because some of these things would answer some topics, others would not. So I can't tell you, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you line by line, item per item, which ones fit under which. Please read the solicitation and decide for yourself what you want to write. Thank you. From Amy, can you send a link to the recorded session, please? I'm sure Ben is going to post something right at the end. Waiting for more questions. We have 9 minutes left.
I would like to add one thing to the last question that Dr. Platz answered, that, you know, Dr. Bowers, my deputy, and myself, we read tens or hundreds of proposals. And so please really be focused on what we're asking for, because very broadly and less specific proposals will be very difficult to implement. So what Dr. Platz said is, please read the solicitation and adhere to the specific purposes of it. That's what we are looking for. Not broad, fundamental, health-like proposals, because we are not in that business.
Thank you, Peter. From Marufa, Appendix C, topics 3, 4, and 5. Any analog mission, its data or experiment would be acceptable for this solicitation, or maybe any future solicitation. Thank you. Stand by, please. So within each topic, it states which platform we're interested in. For example, topic 3 is a spaceflight topic. So we would only consider it responsive if you're addressing spaceflight. So please, I know I've said this before, please read the topics in the solicitation for more information. From Baltutech, are applicant firms encouraged to utilize the HERA analog habitat for testing, or can a firm suggest an analog mission habitat to test and collect data from? I believe this was answered previously, that NASA determined the analog, so you should write your solicitation agnostic of the exact analog. If you're proposing short-term isolation, it's likely to go to HERA. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. We'll use facilities that we have access to and combine it with other studies. But again, it depends exactly on which you're responding to and what the topics are and what the circumstances are. But I would not write it specific for a single analog. Any more questions? From William, Topic 4 mentions reducing operationally relevant performance decrements for both individuals and teams. Are you interested in performance decrements resulting specifically from psychological issues, or are you interested in performance decrements arising from lack of use, e.g. forgetting? Dr. Whitmire?
I think it's important to tie your performance decrement to the intent of the solicitation. So, for instance, with topic 4, where it's talking about issues related to conflict and some of the psychological aspects of that, then how those tie to performance. So I think if you're looking at a performance outcome, you need to provide the rationale for how that ties into the overall topic and the focus of the topic itself.
Thank you. 4 minutes left. Do we have any more questions? From Murali, if there are any more questions, clarifications needed, how should that be addressed? The solicitation has points of contact for each topic being solicited, so you should contact the person listed in that particular topic. Ben is reminding, and Ben has posted the link for everyone to go to that will summarize what we've talked about here today. Thank you very much, Ben. Those are all of your links. And since we see no one else typing, and we haven't for a few minutes, we're going to call it here. Thank you very much for your participation. We appreciate your questions. We hope we've given you the best answers possible. From my recollection, there were 2 questions that we did not answer that we will post on the website as soon as we have good answers for you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.